Thank you for joining us on the Winning and Selling Podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
I imagine that most of our listeners are pretty good at selling. I would even wager that most of you are in that vaunted top 20% that make most of the sales for your company. Perhaps that gives you a little swagger at the awards convention, but really that's a pretty small pool of candidates. How about being the best in the industry, the best in your city, or even one of the best sales professionals in the whole country? Now that would be something. Be ready to have your greatness challenged as Scott and I deliberate on how to become a sales GOAT, greatest of all time, and other cool topics on episode 582 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Bill, you always make the episode sound so interesting when you pick the topics.
Are you saying that it won't be interesting? I only make it sound.
I'm kind of stuck on vaunted. Vaunted.
Okay.
That's a word. I don't know.
I get out the thesaurus when I do my intros.
That's good.
But before we get to that.
Yeah. We're starting a new book, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. This book was written in 1988, and I've never seen it in soft cover. And I've heard that before. We had Anthony Iannarino on the show, and he talked about Spin Selling as probably one of the most powerful books that he's ever read that had an impact in his career. And we should have him on the show again soon. I think he's got another book out that we can share with our readers.
Excellent.
But
Reach out.
Book, the book club, chapter 1 is Success Behavior and Sales Success. And again, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. And the first chapter really, I think, adds a lot of context to the content that's coming up in later chapters. They talk about traditional sales training and how the process has evolved over the last 35 years. And based on when the book was published in 1988, they talked about traditional sales process at the time. And it was really kind of broken down into 5 steps. And he's done other processes within this chapter too. So let's talk about kind of the traditional sales process and how things went during a sales call before Spin Selling came out. And the first thing was that the opening of the call, it's the approach. And this is where people sounded like salespeople. Everybody that answered the phone knew it was a salesperson. And salespeople had to start doing things different when it comes to opening the call. And they're going to talk a little bit more about that again within the book. And then the next step is that the investigating needs was the traditional sales process. Part 3 was giving benefits, and we've seen that. We've done proposals and we've done presentations. And then the step 4 is handling objections. And that seemed to be a normal step of the sales process. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then the step 5 was the closing technique. So it was really 5 different steps. And as we get into Spin Selling, we're going to see that has really evolved, but that has created kind of the mantra and the process that prospects recognize salespeople playing. Bill, you remember this sales process when you first started in sales?
Well, I think, as usual with almost every book, and I do appreciate the revolution that Neil Rackham brought to this, but we're going to rename some of these things and do some of the same things. We're just going to do them better. So I think these steps are still going to be taken in his process. Maybe we don't have as many objections that we have to handle, or we don't do it in the Tom Hopkins, 5,000 different objection handling ways, but we still have to deal with the challenges that people have in deciding whether to move forward with an opportunity or not. So I'm curious to see how he renames these. And I do think that we don't want to get ourselves caught in this process where we're trying to hammer the customer through a sales process. But, he says investigating needs. Well, we don't do that anymore. We do spin. Well, yeah, we're going to do those things anyway in your spin process. You've laid out the different kinds of questions a little bit better.
Right.
And so we're digging deeper into these processes or these steps of the sales process to do a more effective job and maybe even be able to not have so many benefits all shoved down people's throats. But for me, I look at a plan. Here's a proposal. Here's a plan that takes into effect the issues that you have. Much more of a consultative process, which is what I think Spin Selling brought to all of us.
Mm-hmm. And he has kind of a research process that he talks about in this chapter, with 4 different stages of it. This preliminary, it's the investigating, it's demonstrating capacities, and then obtaining a commitment.
Capabilities, demonstrating
Capabilities.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And
Demonstrating
obtaining commitment.
capabilities
Yep.
and obtaining commitments. Yeah. And that seems to be kind of a broader overview, kind of top down.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts everything into context when it does come to the questioning techniques, which is what the spin selling process is basically the questioning techniques. Is that a safe assumption, Bill, on how you'd summarize it?
Yeah, I think we're really going to spend time in it, used to be called investigating needs. Now he's called it investigating, so we're
Yeah.
still going through the same steps of this process, maybe as I said, in a better way. But certainly I would agree with the contention that most salespeople don't do enough good investigating. They don't have enough different types of questions, and the spin process is the different types of questions: situational, problem oriented, implication, and needs payoff questions. People do not have those. They're not ready for them. And when we're not ready with good questions, where do we start doing? Start showing them all of our stuff.
Yeah. Seeing what sticks.
Yep. That's seeing what sticks. Seeing what sticks. The SWS sales instead of spin. I call it barf your product, capabilities all over them, but that's, yours is nicer.
That comes closer to my mantra, which is SW, 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 SW. Some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting. And we need to have that mental mantra in our head every time we get in a situation of prospecting and making outbound calls and talking to people that we don't know and being proactive. But in closing out this section about the book, there's one thing that I think this book and this process is really going to identify is handling objections. Overcoming objections. Salespeople get so freaked out about objections, and I did for many, many years. And I think what we're going to find is when we do a great job on the questioning techniques and we remove all of the obstacles, the misconceptions, the skepticism, we are able to make it easier for them to commit. And they want to buy, but they hate to be sold. But people love to make a commitment to get something better that's going to improve their life, ultimately through the services that a company provides to them while they're at work. And everything at work hopefully transfers to everything in our personal lives. So handling objections is always the best way, is before they ever come up. And if you do a really good investigating step, then you're not going to have a lot of objections. Is that pretty safe?
Absolutely, because your investigating leads to a good solution.
Yeah.
And if your solution is thorough, it's thought out, and your question showed that you had an interest in them, that wasn't just tell me enough that I can find a selling gap and start to try and fill it, but I'm really trying to help you come up with a solution that we can work together to provide you with, then I don't find that I get, the objections I get are, how soon can we do this? And what's the timing? And let's, we may have to hammer down costs a little bit, or we may have to spread costs over a larger period of time. But the objections aren't, well, the other people do it better than you. Because if I created the business through prospecting, I don't have a lot of competition. And even if I do have competition, if I did a better job with the solution, then we're moving forward. So I just don't think a lot of objections come. They're just more clarifications of the solution.
Love that. And when you get to a point of loving objections, you're loving the clarifications. And it's a question that is being asked because you have created a bond, there's trust established, and it looks like there's going to be a great lasting relationship when that occurs. So
yeah.
Great
it's
summary.
A good book. Good start to it.
Yeah.
As usual, the first chapter is just kind of laying out here, what are we going to talk about? So
right. Yeah, I got to create the context of it. We're going to cover chapter 2 next week. So if you haven't bought the book, Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, pick it up. It's not too late to catch up.
As we move on to our main topic today, how to become a sales GOAT, greatest of all times. When I was growing up, the GOAT was the worst player.
Yeah,
he was the person you blamed everything on, and I started hearing this GOAT term used about Tom Brady, and it's like Tom Brady's the GOAT. I'm like, GOAT, he's the great player, and then I found out it was an acronym for greatest of all time. So, how do we become the greatest of all time in sales? Because our listeners, Scott, they're probably reading. Some of them are following along in the books we're advising and we're covering. They've been listening to us, some of them for a couple of years, and they're trying to get better at what they do. They're trying to become the best possible salesperson they can become. And I've identified 4 areas where I think we can get better, and we don't always look at these in our selling terms, in our selling process. So
Yeah. It's a great list.
so our first one is a breakthrough your mental limitations. And you made me think of this one. So I'm going to let you cover a lot of the material in this, but we all have beliefs that we're dragging around, don't we, Scott?
Oh, we do. It's a suitcase. It's a backpack. It's a suitcase and a backpack.
I think of Marley's ghost carrying the chains.
Yeah, exactly.
We wear the chains we forged in life, and we're dragging these old limitations around with us.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the limitations you've seen people have as they?
I think, the ultimate one, and I think this is probably the first and most obvious, is don't talk to strangers. I think, we were all raised, most of us were raised with that as a child and at a young, impressionable age by somebody who had a tremendous amount of authority and influence on us. So we carry that forward. I think in today's culture, we're probably more worried about offending somebody. So we just keep our mouth shut and we don't talk to anybody on an elevator or standing in line. And those are great times to meet people while we're still out and about. So just the belief of not talking to strangers, I think the relationship with money is also very destructive. With
I don't deserve to make that much,
or it's not polite to talk about money. So we think about what of our biggest objections are usually caused by the limiting beliefs that we have.
Well, I think some of the limiting beliefs are I can't believe I'm making more than my father or mother did.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I've gotten to this house and this status, and well, that's better than I ever imagined it could be, and therefore I limit myself in that way. I think I agree with you. I never told my children to be careful.
Yeah, good.
I wanted them to. I never told them don't talk to strangers. But I just think it's terrible the way that we've insulated children, and now that we're seeing the results of that, kids don't even come out to play. So It's kind of crazy. Anyway, a couple things to break through your mental limitations. Set goals higher than your quotas. How about that? How about your boss's quota? Instead of saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you gave me that much for my territory, why don't you beat that by 10% and quit limiting yourself and starting up by thinking you can't make it? Use daily affirmations. You've got to build your belief to overcome these mental limitations. You've got to convince your mind. Yes, you have to brainwash yourself through affirmations that you deserve and you have the capability to do better than you're doing. And then finally, I think hang with people with higher incomes.
Oh, definitely.
We believe that we're the top dog. We're in this small pond, as I mentioned in the intro, and we think we're the top dog. Start hanging with people that are better than you and have them draw you up to their capabilities. That doesn't mean you go out and buy a car you can't afford. It means you increase your income so that you can buy that car you can afford. Wow. So you got to break through those mental limitations. I think affirmations and hanging with higher income people are the 2 best ways to do that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you're looking at your friends and you got the 4 closest friends, where do you fall on the ladder when it comes to status or income or experience or knowledge? And if I'm hanging around a group and I find that the people around me have more experience and knowledge and generally are older than I am, I find that I learn a lot.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that the greatest of all times has is a good mentor and somebody that they look up to.
Yeah, we're going to talk about having a sales coach as part of that, the last one. All right, the second one is you need to become an expert in key verticals. So you can't be a total generalist in everything that you do. Your company, your product has certain vertical markets that are using your product more, or that could be, let's say that you sell some kind of electrical parts, and maybe you've never gone and talked to people in the boat business. So is the boat business a possible good customer for you, or people that make whatever? So try to think about, is there a vertical market that needs your product or service that you could become an expert in, so then you could start talking to people in those markets. And if you find that vertical, let's say it's boats, start to find professional organizations, boat building organizations and attend those meetings. So
Yeah.
quit attending the salesman workshop and start attending the boat building association, because those are your customers. We tend to get into associations that are full of people that are already doing what we do,
Mm-hmm.
instead of finding associations that buy what we sell. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important. Read articles and blogs about those verticals and start to become more informed. So when you go and talk to the boat buying people, you're bringing them something. You're bringing them some information. You're bringing them some ideas. And then meet with key players in those verticals and start to develop expertise. So you have to find an area. So again, if it's electronics, you become the expert in boat electronics, and then you're the go-to person. And then if those organizations have speakers, be a speaker for them, write articles for them, because you've become an expert. So find a vertical and develop yourself in that vertical. Thoughts on that, Scott?
It's a great advice. And I think about a chapter out of Think and Grow Rich. They have a chapter on specialized knowledge. And I think there's so many niches these days, more than there was when Think and Grow Rich was written, about how you can have specialized knowledge. You can really become an expert within a niche, and people will turn to you. And with that, they'll pay for the knowledge. It's not, about a plumber on, what pipe needs to be fixed. It's finding the right pipe that needs to be fixed. I didn't use that analogy very well because I've heard people explain it better than that, but I didn't prepare for that one very well. But I think people know what I mean by that. So that specialized knowledge is just really great advice.
That's right. It's not hitting the pipe. It's knowing which pipe to hit.
Yes, exactly.
There
Much
you
better.
go. There you go. All right. Yeah. I think too, you can develop that expertise on LinkedIn, or start to
Exactly.
advertise that expertise on LinkedIn, and again, get into those associations. That's a great place to get into business associations. So become an expert in key verticals is my second point. My third point, and this is one for all of us: manage your priorities more effectively. Now, some of you hear time management, and that's okay. But time management is priority management. So number one, guard your time ferociously.
Mm-hmm.
Quit taking meetings that don't matter. Only take meetings that matter. If somebody asks you to be in a meeting, you say, why do you need me there? And what do you want me to contribute?
Yeah. Yeah.
And quit spending time in meetings, even when your boss asks you. Say, I'm happy to meet with you. Tell me why you want me there. Tell me what we're going to talk about. Create some sort of a mini agenda, so you go into that meeting with something that you need to talk about. Use time blocking. If you're going to become an expert, you need to block out serious pieces of time to write articles, to write speeches, to go meet with people. So you need to block time in big sections and in your day. You can't have a day that's always being pulled by whatever the current customer need is. If it's 15 minutes, if it's 45 minutes, put that into your calendar. 45 minutes meeting, and that meeting is with yourself to deal with the issues that you have at hand. And then finally, on guarding your time, work with internal resources to deal with smaller customer problems. Quit dealing with everything yourself. Do you have inside salespeople? Do you have somebody that does the traffic work at your organization, that guides the project through? Quit taking every little piece on yourself, and get them associated with some people in the organization that can help them with their problems directly, instead of you always being the conduit to every little thing that has to happen. You've got to get rid of time wasters so you can use your time more effectively. How about time thoughts on that for you,
I
Scott?
love the time blocking. I think we need to prospect. We need to time block for prospecting. And we also need to be able to think about creative time too within our day, so that we can separate ourselves from the stress. And when we reduce our stress, our creativity goes up. And I think better ideas come on a walk than sitting at a desk. And it's natural. But and then the last point that you make about, small customer problems, getting an assistant is a big deal for some people that are self-employed in a small business, but it really is going to help you maximize your time if you prioritize your activities.
Yeah.
But great,
Good.
great advice.
All right. Part B in managing your priorities is to get rid of or reassign customers with low value. And too many, I just had a talk with a client yesterday. How many customers do you have that are costing you money? He said, too many.
Yes.
And that is true for everybody. If they're costing you money and they're not going to grow, give them to your competitor, because
Mm-hmm.
customers that are a pain and aren't growing are never going to be of value. So what am I looking for? Somebody that's too much of a headache. Somebody that hasn't grown in the last 5 years. Somebody has low potential for future growth. They're never going to be big. They're always going to be by onesie twosie, right? Maybe
Right.
maybe you don't get rid of them. Maybe you give them to the new salesperson. Maybe they can put some energy and some activity into them when you've given up on them. So they don't have to always leave the company. Maybe that's where the new salesperson start, is with some of these tougher customers, and they want to put some energy and activity into them. Can't remember what book it was that I read. Maybe it was How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling, but he was given a bad customer, but he didn't know it was a bad customer. And he went and sold him something.
Right.
So sometimes we just have a mental block with a customer. We need to reassign them.
Yeah, yeah. Good old Frank Betcher from How I Raised Myself from a Failure to a Success. A great book. This is another great section, and working with customers that are not making you any money, are costing you money, and that is a very tough decision to make when you need to be able to set them free. But have a conversation with them, because that customer is getting more value than they're paying for. It's a bottom line as well.
The conversation can be, your prices are going to go up, or we're going to give you to somebody else.
Yeah, yeah.
We either have to make money on you, or we're going to let you go. And it's always the small customers who want the most discounts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Part C on manager priorities: actively hunt elephants. It doesn't take any longer or much longer to land an elephant account than it does a mouse account. Anyway, small accounts take just the same amount of time as big accounts, but big accounts are where the profitability comes. So if you start to hunt for those, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to having the difficult conversation, doing a deeper dive in your investigation and your discovery. And then you'll be able to call in the big guns, the president, the vice president of your company, for support when you start to close that deal.
Mm-hmm. And they're going to be more focused on value than price, those folks. And it's going to make it easier for you to do things for them when they're paying you a lot of money, the elephant. And at the same time, we need to be cautious and aware of how much business that we're getting from that elephant. Because if it gets up to be 30 or 40% of your business, you're taking a tremendous risk at the same time. So sometimes spreading it out
need
is
four
good.
elephants. You don't need one.
You're right.
You have to be able to lose one, because they're putting the pressure on you. So,
yeah.
All right. So that's number 3, manage your priorities more effectively. Finally, number 4, become a more effective salesperson. Now, I may be talking to the choir a little bit on this, Scott, by talking to our listeners, but 3 points on this: get a sales coach. Nobody hits excellence if they're not being guided by somebody who can take an honest look at them from outside. They're going to help you overcome your barriers. They're going to give you new ideas outside of what your company historically does. And I bet you'll pay off your sales coach in one good deal.
Definitely. And I think the incremental growth reinforced over time is a good mantra. I think too often Bill and I get called into companies by the owners, the leadership of the sales channel, and so many opportunities have gone by. So we're called in and we're asked to fix a sales team versus grow a sales team. Now, first we got to fix them before we can grow them. But if we were brought in sooner and just had this incremental growth, just doing a sales meeting once a month with us, or pick one of us and invite us in to do a sales meeting and get that small little nugget, a minimum investment, and it's going to maximize the behavior and the results from the people that are in the room if the information is relevant. And that's one of the things that Bill and I really crave, is relevant information in today's marketplace. And we love sharing that with our listeners and customers.
Absolutely. We love coaching. We love that challenge. All right. Number 2, read. If you're not reading 5 selling and 5 personal development books every year, you are getting behind. You are getting too much in your own head, and you're not creating new ideas from out. And I don't mean listen to them on tape. I think there's something about reading and underlining and looking at those words and being able to go back over them. When you listen to an audiobook, an idea passes you by and you're on to the next idea and nothing happens with it. You've got to read and do something with it. And this is the cheapest form of education you will find. A good book. Pick up Neil Rackham's book, Spin Selling. Read along with us. Don't just listen to us and hope you pick up an idea. When you read it yourself, your brain engages and you say, oh, that's where I'm screwing up. But you won't always hear that by just listening to us.
Yeah, exactly. I've gotten so far as to get an Audible and buy the book and have Audible read me the book. And I find out what's most important and what's not because I find out what they included in the audio edition
There you
and
go.
what they did it.
Summarize it. All right. Finally, take a selling class.
Yeah.
You're not too old to learn. You're not too old to pick up some new things. And in 90% of the cases, what you're going to pick up from a class of some kind is, my gosh, I used to do that and I don't do that anymore. Why did I stop doing that good thing?
Yeah, so true. That's so true.
So let me recap those 4 things. Break through your mental limitations, become an expert in key verticals, manage your priorities more effectively, and become a more effective salesperson. So that's what we would recommend, Scott.
Oh, all good points, all good advice. Next week, we're going to be talking about signs salespeople are leaving. So, kind of a complete opposite of this is these are the greatest of all time. And here's a group that's thinking about leaving. So, we're going to talk about some of the attributes to look for when salespeople are thinking about leaving. Our golden nugget for the day is if we don't embody the mission in action, we will never make an impact. And this is from Donald Miller, who wrote a book called How to Grow a Small Business. And I started reading this. It's a 6-step plan to help your business take off. And that was one of the quotes in the first chapter. And I really, really related to that as embodying the mission.
Excellent. Yeah. And you got to have a mission, right? What
Yeah.
are you doing? What are you part of? We don't like to be in submission, but submission means I'm under the mission of. What am I under the mission of? What is guiding me? Do I have a personal mission that I'm driving toward, or am I just kind of going through the day, doing activities, hoping something happens? So whether you're part of a larger organization or you're an individual solopreneur, you've got to have some kind of a mission. All right. Excellent quote, Scott, from Donald Miller. What was the name of the book again?
How to Grow a Small Business.
All right. All of this information will be at winningatselling.com. Go to the show page. This is show 582. 582.
So next week, chapter 2 of Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. And again, the topic is going to be signs salespeople are leaving. Please subscribe and share this podcast with your colleagues and on your social media networks.
Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.